Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm very happy and very privileged to be joining you all and being part of the Ambedkar King Study Circle. I'm very happy to be part of this conversation. So, just kind of before we start, I wanted to look at the topic of our discussion today. So, just to kind of get it exactly correct, it is the Indian diaspora and the global life of inequality, caste without borders. So, just before we start, like Jai Bhim to everybody, Namo Buddhaya, thank you all. Uh, and when we talk about global caste without borders and inequality, like the global life of inequality, uh, like how do we frame this question is always more important to me and my work than actually, like what do we say about it? Like, how do we frame this question about caste and not just about like diaspora and overseas, but in general, how do we frame the caste question is often a very important framework for me. So, I'll give you an example, and I thought I'll start today's talk with this little story of this clip I saw on Instagram. I actually referred to it in my book also. Be the Savarnas. So in India, there is like a very widely popular TV show amongst all these MBA types. It's a US import, of course, called Shark Tank. So there is a judge on Shark Tank. One of the judges, this woman called Radhika Gupta. So she has some funds or finances. She's an investor, or if you know the Shark Tank show, you understand what the concept is. So the clip one day I saw on Instagram was she is part of she's on somebody's podcast, and the podcaster also looks like me. He's like this bald bearded guy, but he has way more money than me. He runs a very successful. Although, like, we don't know what it means in India. Like when businessmen call themselves very successful, we don't really actually know what that means. Like, how much debt do they have and all that. But like, let's not get into that. He claims he runs a very successful company called the Bombay Shaving Company. Okay, so his whole online personality, you can look these people up. His name is Shantanu Deshpande or something. Like his whole personality, his whole brand is that he's a dude who runs a successful business, has like all the top notch qualifications, MBA from the top places, worked in one of these big financial companies, I forget, like one of these Wall Street investment banking companies in India. Then he struck out on his own and runs his company which sells safety razors and things like that. And he, on the side, he also runs this podcast content creation business where he talks about business ecosystem, entrepreneurship and all that. So that's the stage. I want to just set this up very clearly. So there is this guy and he's interviewing this woman. She's a judge, and the clip is very fascinating because they are both giggling, laughing ghoulishly about how these days young people in India don't want to work. Okay, which is a very strange take to kind of give in a country with with where there's like serial consistent exploitation of labor, especially in physical manual labor. But then they add an extra line to it which connects it to our topic, to this. At some point, in the discussion, like they're both bonding over this, they're both laughing, okay, like these days young people don't want to work. Yeah, they don't want to work. They just want to make some money, buy an iPhone, take a personal loan, go out on a holiday to Greece. They just don't want to work. And they were both laughing at this aspiration to go abroad, even if briefly as a tourist, and using that as a sort of an example of how young people, quote unquote, in India don't have a work culture. So the interesting thing about this is, like, when you see it, it's incredibly irritating, annoying, this clip by itself. And there is a certain set of person who will see this and who will be like, yes, this is exactly the problem with India. I'm not going into the content morality of the discussion. What I found very interesting is when I investigated who are these people actually, like what have they done, where are their background, what are they part of. I realized that Radhika is actually the daughter of a I think IFS officer. She has been practically living abroad, working abroad. She has even gone out and written her like she studied in some, one of these Ivy League US universities. I think it was, I want to say, Yale or Princeton, one of them she was in. And she found her husband there, and they, like something like that's her whole backstory. She's a daughter of an IFS, moved around all her life, studied in the US, got into investment banking, met her partner there, and now she's in India, runs her company, business, whatever, or work somewhere, and goes on podcasts and says these things about people who want to go abroad for holidays. And the guy interviewing her, Shantanu Deshpande, he's, I think, also literally born in the US, because his father had, like, back in the day gone and I think was working in Texas or somewhere. And this guy was born there, he grew up there, then he comes to India, does like MBA from one of the top places, and now runs his company. So these are both people who have roots abroad, who kind of have always been, in a sense, overseas, right? India has been one of the material realities that they circle around. And so when you listen to a clip like that with that as a background, then the clip takes on a very different dimension itself. It's not just a annoying complaint, a bad take on, young people's work cultures. It is also a way of saying, no, no, this is our territory, this is not your territory. And then, if you, in addition to this context, if you go one step more, what is that one step more? uh, like, in post-colonial India, once the British leave, one of the very interesting things that they develop, and some people have written about this, a research, very nice research paper about this also, about India's passport policy post independence. As some of you, I'm sure, already know this, that initially the Indian government's official position was that the passport is not a fundamental right of an Indian citizen. We will not give passports to people, because the anxiety was Indians, all kinds of Indians, will go abroad and quote unquote embarrass themselves. So only the quote unquote best quality of Indians will be allowed outside. Now, what that meant is, I think, like in the 50s, I think 60s, almost late 60s, there was a major court case, and I think it goes all the way to Supreme Court. And if I remember correctly, there was a five-panel judge or a three-panel judge. I think it was a whatever, like it was still a split judgment. I think it was a five-panel judge which split judgment 3-2, which said no, no, you have to give passport, which mean two Supreme Court judges actually dissented, saying that no, we don't really need to give Indians passport, right? So then they gave it, but then again, as you know, I'm now 40 years old. As people who are in and slightly above my age bracket would remember, it used to be very difficult in India to get a passport back in the day. Like when I was growing up, like till the early 2000s actually. So judgment comes in the 60s, but till the early 2000s, passport was like a thing that only very elites had. Like you could get it made, but there was a very long process to it and everything. And then I think around the early 2000s, they started, like, making passport seva kendras like more efficient and everywhere. And I have a clear memory of my father coming one day and telling all of us in the family that they're making passports these days, they're giving passports to everyone, let's all get it made, it's a new form of identification that we should all have. Who knows when this will go away. So there was always this precarity while growing up about forms of identification. Ration card in the used to be in India, they have something called ration card. Like I'm again, like people of Indian origin will know this. So ration card there used to be in those days. a huge, because to access the public distribution system of subsidized food grains, you had to have this card which stated that you have access to a quota of like a section of food at very discounted prices. But more than the food, everybody wanted the ration card, because the ration card was the identity. It was our primary form of identification, right? Then there was like this whole period about people getting driving license. Entire communities, entire villages, nobody has a vehicle. No, it's 7 generations in family have not owned a vehicle, but everybody is getting a driving license made, because the driving license is another form of identification. Then passport comes, I've already talked about it. And then eventually Aadhaar will become the universal ID in the early 2010, 11, 12. And when the I will link back to this thread that I'm building. When Aadhaar came, a very interesting discussion erupted in India, where a lot of the left liberal elites, they were very bitterly opposed to the Aadhaar project. They were saying that this will increase surveillance, this is intrusion, this is a waste of public money, and they genuinely tried to fight it. Okay, now how much of those concerns were actually legitimate, not legitimate, I don't know. I don't want to get into that. But what I do want to say is, when Aadhaar was launched, most of India stood in queues for years to get an Aadhaar made. As a result, everybody in India almost has an Aadhaar, right? So much so that today Aadhaar is not considered by Indian government, because they're like, oh, everybody has it, including like illegal aliens who come from outside and everything. Everybody has it. But what the left liberal elites fail to understand, that their anxiety with privacy and surveillance, is surveillance means very opposite things in opposite parts of India. Like surveillance anxiety comes for a certain section of people. For a different section of people, this is yet another proof that I exist on this piece of land and this is my identity, right? And the latest I will share with this group, I think as recently as a few weeks ago, some weeks ago, I was reading this news story. I think it was Delhi, that people in Delhi slums are placing multiple orders from Amazon, right? In many cases, they are like, and it'll be very small value item. Like they're not buying big purchases, just some very small value item, which Amazon will come and deliver to them. In some cases, if where the return is allowed, they're getting it and returning it also, right? The reason why they're doing it is because when the Amazon delivery comes in India, it also has like a sticker on it which tells the name of the person and the address. So this is yet another form of identification. They're saying that I have lived here. They're doing it regularly. So say I've lived here in this lane, in this Juggi Basti slum, and I've been living here for a while. So in many which ways, the Amazon purchase now becomes yet another form of identification. Why I'm sharing this is that if you think about it, it is over 75 years, 77 years, a large section of India, okay, is still grappling with trying to say we exist, we are here. We are still trying to catch on to forms of identification. And you can see the more things change, the more they don't change. Now, there is an electoral special, whatever, revision, intensive revision of roles is happening. They're going into Bihar and they're saying, well, you don't live here, you're a migrant worker, so they're striking your name off. So there's constant like churning. It's not a one-way street, right? So you're constantly trying to get new forms of identification, and constantly there is a sort of erasure which is constantly going on. So now the question comes, who are these people who are struggling with it? Now, there is a very high correlation with your position on the Varna pyramid, caste pyramid, with this level of identity precarity. Income precarity is there, but I'm also talking about identity precarity. Identity precarity means that you don't even exist in the discourse, you are not there, you're invisibilized, or you're just specks, you're just dots which can be moved around on the thing, and only certain people get to have identity. In many which ways, the paradigm of the passport for special people, in many which ways that really has not changed, if I am taking a little bit of poetic liberty. In against this whole backdrop, if we now go back to that clip that I was talking about, of these two people sitting and laughing at some, let's say, kid who's working, I don't know, like in some um, small level job, earning 20-25,000 rupees in India, which is not a lot of money, and you take that sort of money and has aspirations, like he can't buy property with the money he's making. He'll never be able to buy the 5 crore house flat in Gurgaon. Like those things he will never have access to. He's not going to be able to buy like this 30 lakh rupee SUV car vehicle. He's not going to have access to that. What he does have access to is a 80,000 rupee phone through an EMI, where every month he's paying 4-5 thousand. It is a huge thing in his 25,000 rupees salary, that 5,000 6,000 he's giving away. But at least he has access. It's an aspiration. He wants something that he can own. Similarly, personal loan, you'd go abroad a little bit and like be a tourist somewhere. These are very interesting aspirations. When I was younger, for a lot of people, Goa used to be that aspiration. Forget overseas, because like this was the whole thing. I've grown up around so many people from SC/ST OBC communities, who used to know, like actually still will be like, yeah, I want to go to Goa once in my life. What is there in Goa? They might be themselves coming from the beach. That's not the point, beach area or coastal area. The idea is that there is some kind of an aspirational notional value of elevation, of hope, of trying to be like, I want to be in that space. And now if you go to Goa in India, if you see the discourse around it, all the English speaking discourses, oh, Goa is ruined. Goa is ruined. Goa has ruined because Goa has an over tourist farm. Too many people have come. Who are these quote unquote too many people? Right? In many which ways, it once again mirrors this anxiety of who's the right kind of Indian, right? And so now all the people in the early 2000s who would see films like Dil Chata Hai and like want to go to Goa for a holiday and all, now they are going to Sri Lanka or Southeast Asia, or even uh, Turkey. Now, of course, Indians are not going to Turkey because they have become patriotic, but like for whatever reasons, like they're traveling out, and Goa has become like some sort of a subaltern tourist aspirational destiny. So now you can actually say nasty things about it. So in many which ways, I just want to make a point about today's topic, which is Indian diaspora, the global life of inequality, and how this idea of whose aspirations are valid and whose aspirations are not valid, who has access to, whose presence in certain spaces, certain geographies is legitimate, and who has to be kept bound within certain boundaries. These are these are not just fluid questions, these are caste coded questions. क्योंकि कौन सी जात से हो, which जात are you, which caste are you, will determine where your presence is valid and where your presence is not seen as valid, is seen as an intrusion, is seen as an excess, is seen as a surplus. So in many which ways, if you see the international patterns of mobility, um, take a country like US itself. So these bodies, when they go abroad, they have to go very precariously. They might be existing in those spaces, but they're seen surplus, they're doing extra wage labor. They're also the subject of a lot of economic anxiety and hate within those societies, as you probably know. Now when I see the sometimes these images of aeroplanes with, like, Indians being sent back, often in chains, under the current presidency in the US. I often wonder which, like, it's very easy to tell which kind of Indians this is. It is not the Radhika Gupta and the Tushar Deshpandes of the world. It is my kind of Indians. It is our kind of people who are being put in the aeroplane and sent back. The other kind of Indian who is a university student, or who that is not really being rounded up in large numbers and like sent. Like, I don't mean to minimize anybody's anxiety. I know there is a very real kind of issue which is playing out on the US campuses, and very frankly, I don't know enough to authoritatively comment on it. But as somebody sitting in India and observing this discourse, which is what I do, it is very clear to me which kind of Indian is more precarious in this debate, which bodies are to be removed and put back in place. And it ties into this conversation about um, how knowledge about these things are itself produced. So, for instance, uh, who has an anxiety that a wrong kind of Indian is abroad? Who has the pipeline to be actually placed in the US? Who has to hack their way into, you know, US, UK, wherever, Europe or wherever? And how are we thinking about this? These are some of the important questions that one must tease out of this. Before we get into it, I'll also like to point out on theme that one of the most prominent scholars of uh, post-colonial studies or subaltern studies is Gayatri Spivak. Gayatri Spivak is very highly respected in academic circles. I think some years ago she came to India to give a talk, and I remember going on Twitter, and the entire the Savarna elite liberal Delhi academia, it was as if like there was, like a rock concert happening. People were writing like, "Oh, I'm getting FOMO, I'm fear of missing out. Oh my God, like it'll be so great to come and everything." And Gayatri Spivak famously has written about subaltern studies. She's written about, like, very often now that statement, can the subaltern speak? So, like, now many Ambedkarites, including myself, have kind of taken that word phraseology and tried to, assert ourselves through it. But again, like, more than what Spivak writes, I am very interested in how she got there. So Spivak's journey, for instance, such a big scholar, is very interesting. She always says that, she comes from, like, background, humble, struggled, and everything. So if you look at her story, she goes to Cornell in the 1960s, right? First question is, how did you get a passport made? Right, like I've already established, this was not a very easy thing to do. Firstly, how did you get it? Secondly, let's assume you had access to a passport. How did you know what a Cornell University was? What this place was? How did you navigate the application process back in those days? Right? How did you get even the most banal, mundane aspects of that application navigated? Because it is 2025 in India, and you can go to YouTube, and there are hazar channels, thousands of channels, which is trying to tell you this is what the TOEFL is, this is what GRE is, this is how you write SOP, this is how you select colleges, and this is still not easy. It is nowhere is it easy. Everybody, no matter how educated and how elite privileged Savarna you are still going through anxiety. In fact, and I was going to come to this point a little bit later, but I'll say here only, introduce this theme here only. There's actually a very booming business happening in India of overseas education consultants, where people have opened companies. They will take 15-20 lakh rupees from you more if their success rate is better. Like, the more stupid your child is, the more money they will take. And they will, like, you just have to pay them money and tell them which country you want to go to, like UK, US, or they will only tell you. And they will do the entire process. They will tell you, they will write your SOP, but it's not just writing SOP. They will craft your CV. They will, like, for the SOP, you need like some social work, some this, some that. So they have connections with NGOs. They'll like produce a certificate that you worked in some sustainability something. They'll get some work experience certificate from some company they like. Everybody's writing glowing letters. And I'm a teacher, so sometimes nowadays, when students ask me, my Savarna students, they'll ask me for a letter of recommendation. Now I have a policy, because I don't like a lot of Savarna teachers, they treat students very badly with letters of recommendation. My policy has always been, if a student is asking for letter of recommendation, I'll give a good one. I should not be anybody's barrier to education. So I used to very generously give letters. Nowadays, what will happen is, so if you go through that, what usually happens is, when you let's say, you're applying, if I have agreed to give a letter, you will give my email ID in the website of Cornell or wherever. They will send me a link and I will upload my letter on their website. As far as I know, 95 to 98% of applications, I've given 100, like almost over 100 letters. This is how it goes. Nowadays, my students will be like, sir, can you give me a letter? Yes, yes, please go. Fine. What are your plans? Blah, blah. So then they'll be like, give the letter to me. And I'm like, why will I give the letter to you? I will upload it on the website. That's the process. No, no, sir. Actually, my consultant has asked for it. What the consultant will do is take letters from 5 or 6 professors, see which one is the best one, and then start uploading it to. So, what I guess is happening is, they are maybe giving some other email ID, or something is happening where the consultant is also posting the letter, I guess. Right. So there, that level of involvement. And then I asked the student, okay, what are your plans? Which university you want to go to? They have not even checked. They can't even tell. They'll be like, I want to go to Columbia. I'll go to Westminster. I was like, University of Westminster is in UK. Columbia is in US. What is the connection? No, I haven't really thought about it so much. I was like, but applications you're doing, yeah, I have consultants who are doing it. So even the job of engaging with where to work has now been outsourced. It's a booming business. Lakhs of rupees are being given, and this is happening very openly, very rampantly. Right. My point in saying this is, even in 2025, this is how, like, this is such a need that an entire cottage industry has sprung up, which is easing your overseas applications. So Spivak was doing this in the 60s. And all these, many of these South Asian studies departments professors who went, let's say in the 80s is also, how did you go there? How did you, before internet, before, passport seva kendras, how did you land up in the US? Tell me that. I'm very interested. And if you investigate that pathway very quickly, it is not even hidden. You will realize in almost every case, they knew somebody in the foreign ministry, external affairs ministry. Somebody knew somebody, some IFS connection is there. I had a colleague in my previous job, like in another private university in India, where this woman had like a PhD from Stanford. And like, she, again, by all means, very mediocre academic. These are also people who are coming in India. They're not writing any research, but they have like the stamp that they've come from us. So they're all institutionally, they're treated different from people like me who have PhDs in India. I'm not going into that domain, because then, it feels like I'm bitter or whatever, which I should be allowed to be also. But like, let's leave that part aside. But I remember there was some overseas conference we were all going for, some 2 3 faculty. And it was in like one of these Eastern European countries. So with the visa ke liye, I was running around. I was trying to figure out, I have done my PhD, I'm a professor, I'm working in a private university. I'm like, calling up some travel agents and all of that. She told me, like, my visa came to my house because, my father has IFS connections or something. Now, I have no reason to dispute her version. I think she's telling the truth. But even if she's not telling the truth, that flex is a very interesting flex. That's a very interesting thing to say. Ki it came on my doorstep. It's also a way of saying ki, like, I have international mobility, you don't. You have to run around. I get these things done very smoothly. So I'm just saying ki, all these people from 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, who are going abroad, doing PhDs there, or getting tech jobs there, working there. There's a second wave of IT workers post 2000s who goes abroad. I'm not talking about that wave. I'm saying pre 2000s, who are already in the US working in the tech sector. It's a very different kind of economic mobility, and which is built on knowledge networks and kinship networks, which are closed to non-savarna people. Very few, and I know many people, and within groups like this there will be people, like against all odds, our people have managed to go there, against all odds, through government scholarships, through some fellowships, like somehow through reservation. I've got like some degree in India, and like somehow I'm leveraging that abroad. Like every SC/ST OBC person that I've met, not OBC so much because like their OBC reservations comes later, but like SC/ST person I've met who has been in the US for longer than 20-25 years, most of the people, like I won't say most, all, every single one, when we start talking about how they came to the US, in every case, it is a struggle story. It is a real struggle story. It is, every element of it is precarious. Even if you're on a government scholarship to study abroad, Government of India scholarship, you're precarious. Your money is constantly regulated. Your living experience is constantly regulated. You're always wondering, will I fall back out of this orbit? Will I go back to India? Now, thanks to organizations like Nalanda and others, there are a lot of our community students who have uh, you know written, like gone into central universities, top universities in India, and next aspiration, they have been able to make use of Government of India scholarships, like National Overseas Scholarship, NOS, and some state governments also, and managed to go abroad. In every single case like that, I know how difficult it is to just get the government money. Like the Government of India selection process is itself very opaque. It's a humiliating process. I know many cases the students from rural Maharashtra have had to go to Delhi and like go appear in front of some some bureaucrat and everything, and like plead their case. People run like helter skelter. They have the admission letter, but the money is not being released, not being approved. They'll go to like some scheduled caste member of parliament, MLA, whoever knows, whatever. Please sir, can you write? They will give letter, they will run around in every single case. And then once you go abroad, money will be released 6 months later, so you start taking loans, and you're just like getting a, like acquainted, and then you're wondering, will the Government of India actually release the money? It can come after 4 months, it can come after 7 months, it can be delayed by 1 year. So you're sitting in some university town in the US, or some university town in Europe or UK. Like how will you feed yourself? So you're taking loans, your family is taking loans, because you're under the assumption at some point the Government of India money will come in. When that money will come in, you will repay all of this. So underneath all of these, people are supposed to study, people are supposed to do well in their academic programs, then they will go on college campuses, and then elite students who come through overseas consultants and things like that, they will, other Indian students will come and say, oh, you're not coming for this protest march, you're not coming for that kind of a thing. If you're on Government of India scholarship, they're watching you very closely. At any moment, anything they feel that you're politically critical of the regime or whatever, they can very easily revoke that scholarship also. And remember, you're already in debt, you're precarious. So it is, even in 2025, this is not at all an easy smooth journey. Every single scholar I know from community who's abroad, a young person doing their PhD or doing their masters, has some version of this story, everyone without exception playing out, right? And within that, they are still resilient, and they're still succeeding, they're still excellent. But my point is, you have two kinds of structures, like this global life of inequality which is being reproduced. On one side, you have this aspiration of a community which has, and especially within the Ambedkarite movement, one of the fantastic and I think globally unparalleled dimensions of the Ambedkarite movement is the idea of education as emancipation, as empowerment. One of the great dimensions of this uh, Ambedkarite movement is the fact that it is not a movement rooted in violence. It is not a rooted movement rooted in vengeance. It is not a movement rooted in assertion, rooted in retribution. It is not a although some people do talk about, nowadays it's very interesting, I see sometimes on Twitter, people will be like, not reservations, give reparations, so although people are saying things like that, but realistically, I don't think it is controversial to say it is not an assertion which is rooted even in the logic of reparations. It is more about rights. I am a citizen, I am equal. Okay, so at the very least, constitutionally speaking, you could have been like, Brahmin or Kshatriya, Thakur, whoever, but now you and I are equal, right? Those, the old order does not hold. This is a constitutional society. You and I are equal. Just that equal claim is revolutionary in many, many cases. And what that means is, remember at the beginning of my talk, I was trying to talk about how there is a constant assertion for claiming identity. That is why claiming identity, not just within Ambedkarite community, but even other marginalized communities elsewhere, becomes a very instinctive thing to reach towards, because equality is the first step towards rights and justice. So the whole mobilization only, and I feel that this is the unique contribution of the Ambedkarite consciousness to India. It is not just for people who identify themselves as Ambedkarite, but even other marginalized community. This has been truly one of the great legacies, that education and citizenship as ideas of assertion and equality, not retribution and restitutive, in that sense. And hence this whole desire for uh, establishing identity. Once I have established identity, I can claim equality based on that. And there is a whole groundswell happening towards it. And on a more specific level, within the Ambedkarite community itself, I'm an outsider to this whole discursive development. I have roots in Punjab. I was raised in Calcutta by Punjabi parents. And Bengal, the anti-caste movement was, Bengal, I get into trouble for saying this, is the most casteist, is among the most casteist states in India, because the, like, discourse on caste is totally erased. It is like people will come out and say, very uh, sharp things about caste and violence in Bihar, or Gujarat or Uttar Pradesh, everywhere, but they'll never talk about caste violence and caste politics in Bengal. In many cases, they don't know only. And if you check, actually, all of the South Asian studies departments and Indian academics in social sciences, especially, large percentage of them are Bengali, Brahmin, Kayastha, and people coming from those communities, who very rarely, if at all, even today, have an understanding of their own role in the caste reproduction. So Bengal is a very caste state. So anti-caste consciousness, Baba Sahib, and all of this, like, very rarely, it didn't come only in my periphery. People like us just grew up. Now things are a little different thanks to internet, but we, like, I did a political science program, and 2003 to 2006, these are peak years of the Bahujan movement. Kanchiram Sahib was still around. Like, the entire fruits of the, this is when the politically, electorally, that movement was really rising. Yet, not one single discussion we had in our political science program on it. We studied the Indian Constitution because of Paul Science course, but we did not study a single writing by Baba Sahib, right? And instead we are reading poems of Tagore and writings of Vivekananda and all of that. I'm not saying don't study that. I'm just saying that these are, like, Tagore especially is not a political philosopher. He's a art, literature, culture guy. Now you're saying, no, no, read this play. From this play, what was Tagore's idea of nationalism? If you're trying to go so hard into reading somebody's work of literature and saying, what were they trying to say, then why are you not at least giving me one writing of Baba Sahib? Why are you not giving me some examples from Kanchiram Sahib's career, from Mayawati's career, from so many other people's career, right? I think when Mayawati becomes first time chief minister in UP, if I remember the story correctly, I think it was Narsimha Rao who said Mayawati is a miracle of democracy, because it is unthinkable actually that, like, a Dalit woman, scheduled caste woman from Uttar Pradesh, in a state like Uttar Pradesh, is now going to be chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, right? So and she did that multiple times. So in a course about politics, democracy, citizenship, rights, how are we not having this discussion? The word caste did not enter my 3 years of discussion. And I must tell you this, and I've written about this in my book also. While we are not studying this in the class, my friends, like, I had, like, in my course, like, I had, like, a small group of 4 friends, and they're all Brahmin. I think one of them was maybe Kais, but they're all Brahmin. Not maybe, like, one of them was Kais, like the others are Brahmin. They used to very affectionately call me Nichu Jat. Like just like I would say or do something which was very rustic, or and they're like, "Hey, Nichu Jat," like, like that. They loved me, but Nichu Jat means Nichu means low, Jat means Jat, caste. So a low caste, so they would just say that very affectionately. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were like, I genuinely believe that. But this was so normalized in their cultural universe to just speak like that. So my point in contrasting this is, while caste is absent from the syllabus and the discussion and the readings, it was very much part of the everyday discussion and conversation, right? And like, just conversation also, like, in the sense of, we would just be hanging out in some one of these boys house, and they would suddenly start a discussion on who would win in a fight between Robocop and Vishwamitra Muni, you know, and, like, I am sitting there and I'm like, what is this discussion? And all of them, they know all the mythology of what Vishwamitra Muni was like, what Kashyap Muni was like, and what is Indra's this and Krishna's. It's like these are very deep mythologies and lore among these people who are playing music of Beatles and watching films of Pedro Almodovar, and like, very very rational thinking sounding mindset. But in their homes there would always be, like, some books which are talking about all these mythologies. They're talking about, like, for them, like, the MCU is the MCU of all these, you know what would, like, Lord Parshuram, if he fought against Shiva, what would happen? That kind of a discussion kids are discussing. And I had nothing to contribute to that discussion because this was absolutely not my universe. And I used to feel like, oh, I am so uneducated. I don't know these basic things. Not never realizing that this is not my world at all. Like, it is not something that we come from where at all. But my point is, Bengal caste was everywhere, but not in these places, right? And it is academics from here, people from here, who have kind of gone out and written these books. What they've done is, in many cases, gone to the US, UK, European academia and started telling, like, basically white people that, look, we are colonized people. You guys don't tell us anything, and now we will speak. We are the subaltern, and somehow, sort of, like, if I very hyper simplify, sort of like guilted them into giving them some academic space within the university system, and never saying a word that back home in our country we are the sort of a colonizing influence. We are the exclusionary influence. So that is a level of intellectual dishonesty which has played out for decades in these places. And I don't know if this is the correct forum for this or not, but I never know what is the right thing to say. I'm just very straightforward talking. I got into trouble in one of these conferences where on caste, where I went on stage, and I think I was supposed to talk about Suraj Yengde's book, like old book, like this is pre 2000. He had written this compilation essay with Dr. Anand Tumble, Radical in Ambedkar. Now I had, at that time I had written it, I had written a review of the book, so I was supposed to talk about this, but this conference was happening much later, years later. And I went on stage and I said that, look, you know, when Suraj wrote this book, it was a long time ago. Many of his views would have changed by now. Dr. Anand Tumble, this book came out, he went to prison, he came out. Whatever I had to say, good or bad, against them now in 2023, 2024, doesn't really matter. I would rather instead talk about, why are we not talking about radical in Spivak? Why are we still talking about, this kind of knowledge production? And I went on stage and I pulled my phone out and I just started opening the website of South Asian Studies departments in Harvard or all of these places. And like, these departments have been operating for 20, 30 years. What have they produced? What are the kind of scholarship are they producing? Let's read them. So they have courses like yoga through the ages and mysticism and things like that. You can check this out. So, or there'll be like some random course called like city and cinema. City and cinema kya hota hai? Like, caste pe maybe now after the last 5 6 years, some readings have come in because, people are writing in English on caste. So there'll be some reading here and there that will be spruced in, but it's actually a very Savarna sanctified kind of a, discussion and discourse. So if you talk about that, some of the well-meaning Savarnas, they start getting attacked. They start saying like, why are you saying all of these things? Mainly because there is also a consistent cultural anxiety of not being critiqued, which is connecting all the loops back together. I started by talking about bodies which are like, the judgment that, those Radhika Guptas and were passing about all the young people who don't want to work, just want to own iPhone and all that. There is a bitterness in that kind of a judgment. These are both millionaires who have lived abroad historically, talking about some of the hardworking marginalized labor. And if you look at the, and this is where I wind down my lecture, like, it's almost like the Savarna elites of India have always despised the large masses of SST OBC poor of India. It's very clear. It comes out in these moments. It comes out in the way subaltern studies is framed. It comes out in the way, you know when you ask for accountability, we can only be objects of pity. So you can go now, like earlier they used to not even agree caste exists. So many of our activists and scholars in the last 20 years have bright careers they have killed off because if you come out anything in academia and start saying that, savarnas this and caste this and all that, they might cite you once or twice, but you're not getting jobs anymore. So I am myself, like, in my introduction, he was saying that, he's also doing podcasting and all that. I think everybody should know that a lot of it is not out of some great leisure I have. I work under tremendous strain, where, like, over and top of my regular job, I have to build this other entire presence, because it's not like I'm going to get good high quality jobs in Indian academia anymore. Not because of any academic reasons. I have a good profile, I have good research now, book is come out and everything. But when you start talking about caste a certain way, you're just soft blackmailed, not blackmailed, blacklisted out of these spaces. And I'm still lucky. I'm still having a job. Many people paid with their careers for putting certain kind of Facebook messages consistently, certain kind of discourse consistently in the university system, and they've paid with their careers. Thanks to them, now some Savarna scholars will say yes, caste exists, right? But how does caste exist? For them, caste research means go do some project on manual scavenging, go do some project on atrocity, which should happen, needs to happen. But the moment you turn around and say, okay, like what about Savarna systems of privilege, then they will again shut you down very dramatically, right? And they will start taking it personally also. So any accountability pointed at them, they will get very agitated. So if I were to actually meet Radhika Gupta or Shantanu Deshpande someday in some event, and I ask him, "Ki, like, buddy, you were saying all of these things. You were to born in the US, and why are you saying all?" He will get very offended. He will be like, "No, no, how can you say that? I worked hard and all that." So this is almost it's showing you a pattern of evading accountability. And I think this idea of talking about caste a certain way, in many which ways, the Savarna society expands beyond the borders of India. Like they feel that they were always meant to be there. This is their natural logical culmination, right? And when we transgress into those spaces, according to them, transgress into those spaces, then they feel very attacked. They either try to patronize us, co-opt us, or they will try to villainize us. And if none of those, like, and if you, god forbid, turn around and start asking them questions, then the meltdown is very real, actually. Like, so in many which ways, they expect, like, the agraharas of the old, like they expect that this is their position, this is their natural position. You can come visit, be a tourist in their world, but you can't stay in their world. So in many which ways, it is a reproduction of this global this inequality at a global stage. And I will end by this last 5 minutes. This is the last point I wanted to kind of make. And you can see a very interesting pattern playing out in India right now. um, the Indian Republic has slowly but very surely been on this march, this momentum towards more and more democratization towards the marginalized castes. It has not been easy, but it is consistently moving towards that path, right? If today in the Indian Parliament, both Congress and the BJP are having debate, like, no, no, we respect Baba Sahib more, no, no, we respect Baba Sahib more. If Rahul Gandhi, the opposition leader, is going around waving the Constitution of India, if BJP is coming out and saying in response, no, no, we will do caste census, they have not come to this position out of the goodness of their hearts. They have come to this position because of consistent cultural, civil society, social, political pressure, mobilization, which is endlessly churning beyond the gaze, beyond the eyesight of English speaking Savarna journalists sitting in Delhi, or Savarna academics sitting in New York, or London, or wherever. This churning they have not been able to see, which is why when you read the Savarna commentaries, it is very bitter. It is very, oh, India, there is hate and all of that. Yes, there is all of that, but you have to recognize, why are these caste centered Savarna parties talking about these issues now? This has happened because of all of these mobilizations. And the way politics is democratizing, other elements of culture, academia, and policy are not democratizing. In fact, all the Savarnas in these spaces have taken a very interesting strategy. They're leaving India. Okay. And last 20 years of Indian education, higher education system has shown us very clearly. 2006, I think, OBC reservation in education finally arrives, right? With the arrival of OBC reservation, and there are lots of issues with OBC reservation. There are thousands of castes who are listed as OBC. Only about 50, 60 landed OBC castes are taking most of the benefit. But even with all the issues, even with all this creamy layer nonsense, which reduces OBCs to dairy products, like creamy, non-creamy, fatty layer, non-fatty layer, and all that. Even with all of those issues, what that means now in the public university system, in an IIM class, in an IIT class, SC, ST, OBC combined is half the class. And that is a very terrifying reality. So almost immediately after that, 2007, 8, 9 onwards, you start seeing the rise of Ashoka University, Jindal University, Mahindra University. Why all these Savarna millionaires suddenly realize they have to start universities for the greater national good? For 70 years, they never thought of it. Now everybody, Ambani, Adani, Goenka, Jain, Agarwal, uh, Mahindra, everybody has their own university, everybody has started it, and a pipeline has been set up. So the elite Savarnas are not raising their next generation in India. It's very clear. There's a pipeline of international curriculum, IB curriculum schools, where the fee is like, 4 or 5 lakh rupees a year. And for 12 years, you pay that fee. Then you send them to like one of these Sonipat liberal education private universities, funded by one of these Savarna billionaires. They will study there and then they will go straight to the US. That's the pipeline that has been set up. And every year, lakhs of people, Savarnas, youth, are going abroad. And most of them will not come back to India. So in many which ways, there's a great exodus which is happening, and they're taking with them this idea of caste. In many which ways, like I said, all these Savarnas from Spivak and Radhika Gupta to the current crop coming out of Ashoka University and such like places, they feel that abroad is a natural extension of their self, of their very selfhood. And for us, for people in from marginalized communities and who have aspirations, our aspirations are still at the level of just struggling to prove to the Indian Republic that I exist, here is my identity, and hence you have to treat me as an equal, and maybe an iPhone or maybe something like that. So this is where broadly things stand. I think we are still some distance away from truly able to hold accountable Savarna systems for the structural reproduction of inequality they have solidified in India and abroad. The true accounting of what they have done and enabled to have done is yet to happen actually. And my book which I've written, Meet the Savarnas, I've written in the book itself, I am not very sure if it's a great book. I think it's an okay book, but it is an like, I wanted to write it so at least that conversation starts. So at least we start talking about caste from the perspective of privilege and not exclusion, because it is a zero sum game. And I'll end with this line: it is a zero sum game. Wherever there is a exclusion or oppression, it is directly proportional to the privilege accrued. So if we are only talking about the exclusion and the violence and the oppression, we are invisibilizing the privilege it pays for. And I think it's high time we start talking about the privilege for which we have paid this cost through violence and exclusion. With that, I would like to close my talk. And
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Before we move on to the Q&A, I would like to introduce Ambedkar King Study Circle and our recent anti-caste helpline. Ambedkar King Study Circle, AKSC, is a membership-based organization which aims to challenge all kinds of oppression, class, caste, race, religion, and gender. We believe that only an organization with dedicated members can take our struggles forward. We hold regular reading sessions. We get involved in various interventions, and we host an annual conference as well. This year, we have launched the anti-caste helpline, 1-844-66-UNITE. That is 1-844-668-6483, to listen, engage with empathy, and provide support to anyone facing challenges with caste discrimination, isolation, or exclusion in the USA and all over the world. We appeal to you all to spread the word about this initiative broadly so that it can reach everyone who may ever feel the need for it. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to all of you, a warm invitation to all of you to our annual conference that is happening on October 4th this year. The conference is a great avenue to meet like minded people, strategize, strengthen, and unite our forces. I'll also post a link to our newsletter on the chat now. It is a low volume mailing list that provides update of all of AKSC's activities. Please subscribe if you're interested in staying in touch with us and our work. Yeah, thank you so much, Professor. It was really wonderful having you talk here today with us. Um, yeah, it was really good hearing about. It almost felt like an episode of Mind Your Buffalo. You started off with the key distinction between the Gen Z hatred at workplace here in the US and in India is that in India it comes from a place of why is this person doing so good, right? The bitterness, like you rightly pointed out. Yeah, I think a lot of these points that you talked about today would have hit close to a lot of people, including me, whose aspirations are valid when we are currently seeing things happening in front of our eyes, this close to home for us. Whose presence is a source of economic anxiety? These are all questions that we should be thinking, taking a deeper look at and introspect ourselves. Yeah, as someone who came to the US for masters in 2022, I know how these study abroad networks are closed to the non-savarna people, and how I've had to, and I know this would be the experience of a lot of people, that you have to survive on the breadcrumbs of your savarna seniors. And that is how you, even though it's 2022, there's YouTube videos, that is how you get some key nuances right. And so thank you again so much for being here with us. Do you have some words to conclude?
No, no, thank you so much for consistently organizing interventions like this. And I'm very honored and happy to be speaking to you all. Thank you for having me here. And it's evening for you all. So have a good evening and have a nice dinner and see you all. Thank you, everybody. Jai Bhim. See you all.